I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome to the Vietnam Veterans News Podcast. News of interest about Vietnam veterans from a Vietnam veteran. Now, here's your host, Mac Payne.
This is Mac Payne here with episode 1863 of the Vietnam Veteran News Podcast. News about the Vietnam War and the brave veterans who served there, as told to you by yours truly, a Vietnam veteran. In this episode, I'm going to tell you about another tremendous representative of the Vietnam veteran generation, one as great as any that ever heeded the call of duty from its country. The Vietnam veteran I'm going to tell you about today is Stewart Novotny. He served in the U.S. Navy in Vietnam. Today, he lives up in Austintown, Ohio. Austintown sits just on the western edge of Youngstown, and it is about midway between Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and Cleveland, Ohio. It's a wonderful area up there. Spent some time up there with a good buddy of mine by the name of John Bullock. John was one of the heroes in the book I put together that was titled Conversations with Vietnam Heroes. I urge you to go to Amazon and buy a copy and hear what John Bullock had to say about his time in Vietnam. In this episode, we're going to tell you about Stewart Novotny's time in Vietnam. It's very interesting. Stuart received his draft notice and decided to go ahead and join the Navy. As usual, they play tricks on you when you join the military. Stuart ended up as a medic serving with the Marines out on the DMZ. Probably some of the toughest duty in Vietnam, right up there on that DMZ. It was highly dangerous up there. I can verify that because I flew Cobra gunships in the vicinity of the DMZ, and you would see things there you did not see in other parts of the country. Most of them were unpleasant. Stuart tells his story. And he also verifies something that when someone goes through an experience like fighting in Vietnam, you are forever bonded with the guys you were with over there. It just happens when you're in those situations. That's what happened to Stuart. Something else about Stuart. After he returned from Vietnam, he had a career in two areas. One, he was a meat cutter in a grocery store chain. Then he spent decades working on the line at General Motors. I'll guarantee you, Stuart did quite well at both of those occupations because when he came home from Vietnam, like most of the rest of us, he was older, wiser, stronger, and better able to deal with adversities than our non-Vietnam veteran contemporaries. Those veterans are as great as any that ever heeded the call of duty from their country. They went over and served their country in a very, very difficult situation in Vietnam. They came home and continued serving their country. Even better, in my humble opinion. There was a story about Stewart Novotny in the Vindicator newspaper, which is headquartered in Warren, Ohio, which is just a few miles north of Austintown. The story was titled, Vietnam Vet Remembers Brotherhood of Navy Men. It was submitted by Ashley Fox, a reporter for the newspaper. Let's take a look at what Ashley Fox had to write about this Vietnam veteran, Stewart Novotny. Dateline, Austintown, Ohio. Sitting on the right side of the plane looking out the window, Stewart Novotny got an up-close view of the aurora borealis as he headed to Tokyo. It was 1967, and Novotny was 20 years old, making his way to Da Nang, Vietnam, to take part in the Vietnam War. It just amazed me. It was a bright light. I watched it as long as I could, Novotny said. Graduating from South High School in 1965, Novotny was 20 when he enlisted in the U.S. Navy, noting that he had just received a draft notice. Wanting to serve his country, Novotny intended on joining the Marines, but when he arrived at the recruiting office, only the Navy recruiter was there. Little did he realize at that time that he was going to end up in the Marines anyway. Being undeterred in his mission to join the military and serve his country, he thought, the Navy wouldn't be that bad. I'll be on a ship. Novotny ended up as a corpsman with the 1st Battalion, 1st Marines with Alpha Company in the 2nd Platoon for 13 months. Notice the Marines could not get enough of Vietnam in 12 months like everybody else, so they made their tours in Vietnam 13 months. The Marines were tough over there, so they had to add another month onto their tour. To all my Marine buddies out there, that was a joke. Continuing. He administered first aid to wounded men, working to stop bleeding and doing what I had to do to keep them alive, he explained. During his tour, Novotny was also injured, taking a bullet in his left arm. He was the second one in the company to be hit. In all, 8 men were killed and 28 wounded out of 152. It was a bullet from an AK-47 Russian-made automatic rifle that he was shot with, and he still carries it around in his pocket to this day. Caught in a firefight that lasted for 4 hours, Novotny said his company walked the same patrol that U.S. Marines did a month prior to being ambushed. They were headed north toward the DMZ, which divides the Vietnam Peninsula. We walked into it, surrounded, Novotny said, recalling that the enemy had markers set in trees. Phantom jets from our side were dropping napalm and 500-pound bombs, Novotny said. They were flying so low I could see their faces. Pardon me, I need to make a comment here. Something that has made me wonder for years. To this day, I don't have an answer for it. The question that has bothered me all these years is, why did we have F-4 Phantom fighter jets flying low and dropping bombs on tactical missions in Vietnam? That means dropping bombs close to the friendlies. It was quite easy for the NVA to knock those expensive F-4s out of the sky because they were so slow. Why did not the military rely fully on the prop-driven Skyraiders? Those aircraft were much more suited for combat in Vietnam. They could carry probably more bombs than a B-17. They were slow, and they could stay on station for like 4 or 5 days, it seemed like. In my humble opinion, they could have done the job just as good or better than the F-4s and the F-105 thuds they were using over there, and losing a bunch of them. If an F-4 goes down and crashes and burns, you just lost a lot of money. If a Skyraider crashes and burns, you didn't lose nearly as much as you did with an F-4. One of these days, I will get that question answered. Matter of fact, if someone is listening and they know the answer to that question, why don't you send me a message and let me know? It still bothers me all these years. Because from my viewpoint, which is quite low over there in Vietnam, it seemed to be a mistake using fast fighter aircraft to fight a war against the guerrillas. The good old Skyraider seemed to me to be perfect. Enough of that. Let's continue with this story. Stewart Novotny has just told us that in that battle that day when he was wounded, the F-4s came in and dropped Snake and Nape close enough where they could see the faces of the pilots. Finally making it out 4 hours later, Novotny said the relief would be short-lived. The driver of an evacuation vehicle taking the wounded back to safety told them they had to go through their own minefield first. That shouldn't be too much of a problem. If it's our own minefield, you know it's properly marked. The friendly should be able to get through it. But it would still be unnerving. You're laying there bleeding like crazy, you got an AK-47 slug in your arm, and now you have to think, what happens if he mistakenly runs over one of our own mines? That would have a tendency to drive you crazy. That's when Novotny said he prayed, and in return, my prayers were answered. as the group made it back safely to Con Thien to be transferred to safety. It was during that experience that Novotny learned something valuable. He said that he discovered that when stressful times present themselves, one must continue. You don't learn things like that if you stayed home in Austintown, Ohio. Novotny said, "You've got to forget about that and keep on going." As he has kept that frame of mind through the years since Vietnam, Novotny participated in a book, just like my good buddy John Bullock did in my book. The writer he collaborated with was Arthur Kenneth Jordan, who wrote Alpha First to the First Vietnam, a narrative where he interviewed veterans about what they saw and experienced in different battles. That is a narrative where he interviews veterans about what they saw and experienced in different battles. After being discharged 3 months shy of his 4-year enlistment, Novotny worked at Kroger, where he was a first-class meat cutter for 10 years, followed by a 30-year career on the line at General Motors in Lordstown, retiring in 2006. He married his wife Donna in April of 1968. The couple first lived in Boardman before settling in Austintown. The couple has 4 children. Stuart Jr., of course, Susan, Sharon, and Sharon. And now they have 7 grandchildren. Novotny said there was a sense of brotherhood and camaraderie that was established while fighting alongside fellow corpsmen and soldiers. "We were young," he said, adding that those fighting were able to work for 4 hours, then rest for 4. When it came down to race and color, everyone was tight, he said. "Halfway around the world, you are one unit. You fight to protect each other." No truer words have ever been expressed by a Vietnam veteran. We were all bonded together. We fought to protect each other, and we were bonded to that situation for life. To me, that's a good thing. Now you know the story of another Vietnam veteran, Stewart Novotny of Austintown, Ohio, who talked the talk and walked the walk. America is very fortunate to have citizens like Stewart Novotny. He has served his country well. I am hereby issuing Stuart unofficial Vietnam Veteran News podcast salute for his service to his country, and I thank him for the example he is setting for us all. Thank you very much, Stuart. We wish you and your family the best. That's my opinion, and I'm sticking to it. This is Mac Payne closing out episode 1863 of the Vietnam Veteran News Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. You are cordially invited to return again soon and often to listen to more that will be coming your way on this podcast, the Vietnam Veteran News.
If you like what you hear, then go tell somebody. If you like what you hear, then go tell somebody. Oh, Lord, go tell somebody. Yeah, go tell someone.
How about that? Ain't that a mess?